There's like, a massive list.
Yeah, there's a bunch of
Alright. Thank you everyone for coming to our industry talk. Today we have Oliver Creel from Foxy Games. I think hanging in the wings we also have Bonnie Lawson and we have Steve who heads up the Foxy Studios.
Cool.
Oliver's going to give us a talk on art. Take away, Oliver.
Quick hands up. How many artists in the room? Much better.
Yeah.
All right. Bonnie is an artist that's joined us, I think, over the last 2 years. She's a previous AIE student, so you might want to pick her brain at some point. Great success story. All right, so I'm just going to, I think it's pressing spacebar or click? Right mouse?
Yes, spacebar will do it.
Spacebar,
Yeah.
all right.
I might just put the back button on.
Uh-oh, how do I get back? Back. All right.
Now you're not in darkness.
All good. All right. Feel free to ask questions at any stage, and I'll just run through this so that we can have some questions afterwards. And, maybe I can pick Bonnie's brain in front of you guys, and maybe get some information you might want to learn on how to make that transition from student to professional. All right.
I can do
It's all good. So I want to skip this. I won't skip it, but I'll skim through it. So basically, I'm a perfectionist, but I'm a sort of, we'd say, clinical perfectionist. So I really like things to be sort of lined up and looking good, but that expectation's beyond what's actually achievable. So like hardcore perfectionist. So basically, how I manage that is I look at what the commercial benchmark is, and I make that my target. And that might be helpful for some artists as well. Sometimes done is better than perfect, but you can't abuse that at the same time. So know what your commercial benchmark is. A lot of the times, freelancers sometimes if I look at stats, the freelancers I work with, a lot of them are below the commercial benchmark line. I have to push them further. So that's generally, if you're wondering which side you are, you're probably below the commercial benchmark, not to insult you. Basically, I feel I'm not a phenomenal artist. I feel I do an okay job. But I have found my strength, and I'm pretty good at art direction. I've got a good eye for detail, and I know if something works. I still do art, but the artists that I hire are far better than I am. So that's usually a good thing to keep in mind. Try to hire people that are better than you, because else you're going to spend all your time trying to get them across the line, and you won't be able to do your job. Okay, interesting fact, I tried working from home for 2.5 years. It does work. The pros is you get to escape reality, you get to avoid people. And you save 2 hours on commuting. It's really good as well, where sometimes office discussions you can get caught into things that you don't want to get caught into. The cons is that, this is quite an important one. You tend to face challenges alone, and you don't have that you don't have people around you to sort of sharing that challenge. And you can still push through that, because a lot of times I still solve my own challenges. I don't find different studio environments, sometimes the people next to you can help you out. Sometimes you have to kind of just go online and solve your own problems. Side note, it's good to keep a little cheat sheet. So if you solve a problem once, record how you solved it, so next time you run into it, you know how to solve it again. Because if you don't keep that, you'll find time and time again you'll run into a problem thinking, I solved this about 6 months ago, how did I do it? Avoid that, just keep a cheat sheet. But the important thing is when you're working from home, you fail to see that other people are struggling too. And it can play a mental game on you. So you just feel, I'm struggling, where if you're at work, you can see other people struggle too. And you also get out of the loop a little bit, where there's conversations that happen quite candidly that you miss out on. And you'll find the project will take a steer to a different direction and you won't even aware why. So online is good, but if everyone's not online, it's not so good. And yeah, change of scenery is pretty good. It's the con, you don't really get that when you're working from home. And funny enough, the thing that I thought I would not miss is something I missed the most. That saving 2 hours of commuting was actually a time I spent on the train upskilling myself, watching tutorials and videos. Work from home, you're funny how that time just gets absorbed into whatever else it is. Oh, I got an hour before work, I'll go catch up on my chores or whatever, and you're just not upskilling. What happened? So, yeah. All right, art careers. I will zoom through this. It's still working here. Note for self. Like, next time for me, I'm going to use a black background so it doesn't blind me. This is working a lot better. So this is pretty standard, but I think for people that don't know too much about games or want to get into games, you'll be surprised how many people are not aware of that and they get into gaming and they totally crush it. You hate those people. But basically, yeah, these are the areas you can explore and you can specialize in those, or you can be a jack of all trade. I'll touch on that later. What is your goal? So this is the next slide. Do you want to be a generalist or a specialist? As a generalist, you're going to see more job opportunities. And for smaller studios, generalist is a good thing as well. So you can help them out with a lot of things. So they'll hire one person, they can do the sculpt, they can do the low poly, they can do the UVs, they can do the texturing. Maybe they won't do the rigging and the animating. So generalist is pretty good, and that's kind of, I'll get into that, but it's probably good to be not such a broad generalist, but also you don't want to be a complete specialist. You want to kind of find that sweet spot in the middle, but everyone's different, and every studio is different, so you have to kind of find out what works for you. But as a generalist, you spread pretty thin, and you're always playing catch up. You're always like, if you run into any trouble, if you have to troubleshoot something, you're learning things for the first time. Where if you're a specialist, you probably bumped your head on that 10 times before. You know how to solve it. Your working day is far easier. You kind of know what you're getting yourself into every day. As a generalist, you don't. Every day is a bit of a bum fight. But a specialist, your quality is better. There's less juggling. You're more confident. But you can only do that one task. So it depends on which studio you're working for. Bigger studios can hire you to do that one task. Negative though is that it might become a bit monotonous. You might actually want to try out a few different things. So you might find over your career you might actually be a generalist, and you specialize. You might want to go back to being a generalist. It might change, chop and change, just to keep your mental space healthy. Another thing is working with some artists. I found you can't judge them too quickly. Sometimes I'll give an artist some fancy stuff to do, and they're not doing well. I'm like, okay, cool. They're kind of getting used to the project. They're warming up. I'll give them another round, a different asset, and it's still not looking good. And I don't know how to describe this to you, but sometimes you just have a gut feeling that this person maybe has, more in them. And I'll try them out on clothing, and they become our best clothing artist in the studio. And it's just such a weird thing where that, as an art manager, you might write them off. As an artist, they might write themselves off and put themselves in a different category, like, I'm inferior, I can't compete. But sometimes some artists can do everything, and some artists are really good at certain things. So if you do find yourself struggling, try to find your strengths. You might be actually really good at something where other people can't even achieve that level. But the best way I can describe it, it's almost like if you're playing role-playing games and everyone's got stats and you put it in different stats. Maybe you've got crazy stats in one thing, like you've maxed out, but you're zero in the rest. So don't be discouraged. You generally probably have a niche that you're extremely good at, but you get some people that are sort of average at everything, and it's just how it goes. Common things that artists forget. I saw this a lot with freelancers. I've changed how I work actually this year. I used to work with me personally, I had about 14 freelancers that I worked with on a given day. It's a lot of correspondence. They're all over the world, different countries. And I would be giving them, because they're part-time, I'd give them little pieces of the project. So the one would be doing the sculpting, the other one would be doing the low poly modeling, and I would then piece it all together. And that's crazy. So what I've done is I've tried to find more full-time artists, still freelance, but I've downscaled it down from like about 14 artists down to about 5. Bonnie being one of those. So yeah, one thing I have seen, because I've seen a lot of art, is artists forget to use initiative. Sometimes they'll read a brief and they won't think outside of that, 1 or 2 liners that we send them. And you get other artists, you send them a brief and they elaborate on that and they'll check with you, but there's a conversation happening. They're pushing back on you and you're like, wow, I didn't think of that, that'll be amazing. Versus you're giving something to somebody and they're actually not even reaching that, point that you asked for. They're not even there yet. You get other artists that are a couple of steps ahead. So try to use your initiative. Work smart, not hard. If something's taking long, generally ask yourself, is there a quicker way? And also, working smart, not hard is try it out on one asset. So if you're doing 50 outfits, try one outfit, see how that works before doing all 50, and then realizing maybe it's not in the right format for the game. If you've got a client, send that one outfit. Is this what you need? Is this working right? That's working smart, not hard. Because if you do all 50 and say, oh, I met the deadline and just all 50, and say it's wrong. Look at Sonic, the game. They designed the character was wrong. They had to redesign the whole character and all the shots in the movie. They should have just done one test. They should have released the trailer, see what the industry, the customers thought of it, and then produce the movie. So use clear, strong theming. I'll start shooting through this a bit faster. Avoid copyright. So basically, try to use three different sources of inspiration. So just look at one picture, thinking, oh, I'm going to make my character like that. Because end up probably be a clone of that character. Understand technical limitations of the project. So some projects are hand painted, some are using PBR workflow, that kind of stuff. Try count. Visual interest. Sometimes what I see often is that artists don't understand saturation. So when you're making something saturated where it's got a lot of color, you probably want some areas where it doesn't have a lot of color, so it balances itself out. If everything's saturated, it's blinding to the eye. They actually use that technique for sports. They'll make sports clothing super saturated, and it's very loud, and that's what they want, but you generally don't want that on an art asset. I find assets are often underexposed. It's almost as if artists are too scared to have darks and lights. It's like they're just trying to not be noticed, and they keep the values very flat. Use strong exposure. You don't want to overexpose something, but use strong exposure. Even looking at that image on the left, the design's improved, but just look at her skin tone. The one's very flat and the other one's not, and things like exposure and stuff can do that for you. Detail, don't try to squeeze detail into everything. If you're looking at an eagle or a bird, suggest some feathers somewhere on the bird. Don't try to show every single feather. It's going to become very busy, very noisy. Look at hair. You don't try to show every hair strand. You think of them as clumps. I ask my artists to give me the soft serve ice cream hair, because that's what I think it looks like. So silhouette. Keep in mind how well your silhouette reads. So obviously we've seen that throughout gaming. Make your silhouette strong. Composition, understand what composition is. Understand, just look into composition. It helps a lot. And there's also visual hierarchy, something I skipped. Something you learn in graphic design, but something you keep in mind when you're doing concepts is try to, where you showing detail, where you showing these feathers and stuff. You're going to have pockets for your eye to rest, so you're not going to show feathers everywhere. But where you start applying more detail and more saturation and more contrast will be areas you want the person to look at. So that'll be the face or anything like that. If there's a special sword they're carrying, maybe the sword's important, we'll do that in the sword. So those are, it's like a currency that you have, and spend it wisely. You don't just go and smear it all over your thing, all over your asset. And if you do spend it, try to be mindful of, okay, cool, I want the user to look at the face or the sword or whatever it is. And if you use visual interest in two areas, try to make the one a little bit less than the other, because they're both shouting at the same time. So they have a primary hierarchy and then a secondary. So character be primary, the flag or the sword will be secondary. If the sword's more important than the character, switch it. But if they're both singing at the same time, not going to work. Yeah, revisit your work with fresh eyes. There's so many times I think I made something that looks amazing. I look at it the next day and I don't want to show anybody. So give yourself a bit of a break from it. You get like sort of tunnel vision, and you'll be amazed what fresh eyes does. You lie to yourself tremendously when you work on something for a long period of time. And another difference between feedback and changes. So I saw this a lot when working with artists remotely. They would see a lot of feedback as changes, and the difference is feedback is when the brief hasn't changed and the artist hasn't met the benchmark. That would be feedback. So somebody does something for you and it's not exactly there, it's not what you asked for, maybe the quality's not right there, so that would be feedback. Changes would be, we don't want a horse, we want a wolf. That would be a change. But a lot of artists would see and misread feedback as changes. So just understand it when you're working with an art director or art manager. When they're dealing with your work, just understand the difference and try not to get too frustrated, and realize if you haven't got it across the commercial line, it's still your responsibility to get across the commercial line. So if they're helping you get it there, don't get frustrated with you, because they're actually trying to help you get across the line. That was your responsibility. They're just trying to help you get there. There was something else I want to mention on that, but I guess you'll never know. Quality control. This is basic stuff. But yeah, set your models to smooth, export with smooth and smooth groups. Model using quads, because then you can use edge loop when you're doing your UVs. Test your LED transitions. Sometimes people create LEDs, but they don't test them, and when they pop from one LED to the other, it's like a whole different silhouette. Make sure that your UVs align. That's in Maya. Sometimes the UVs don't align when you make your LEDs. Combined geometry components. So if something has different components on it, so let's say you design armor and it's got different parts in it, you can still just combine them as one component in Maya. So there's a combined feature instead of a merge. Merge is going to merge your vertices, combine will make it one component. It just has one draw call in Unity. So when the game loads that asset, it just loads it once instead of loading helmets, arms, legs, all the different armor pieces. You can actually combine them all in one piece. Freeze your transforms, because they can muck around, mess the devs around in Unity. So when they bring something in, transforms aren't at 0. Monitor your try count and make sure that there's no sharp seams. Sometimes that's messed with us. Textures, only export when transparency is needed. So if something hasn't got transparency, don't enable transparency, especially if you're working in Photoshop. Photoshop's default is to tick transparency on. That'll bloat your file. So all of a sudden your Unity project gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You don't need to. So like if the asset's got no transparency, probably that character over there's got no transparency, maybe your hair. The rest of it is sort of solid objects. No transparency needed. It keeps your textures smaller. That means if it's a mobile game and they're downloading the game from the App Store, the download's going to be smaller, and sometimes that will make or break if someone's going to play a game or not. Use ambient lighting when you bake your textures, and yeah, when you're doing the smoothest map, don't just make it grey. Try to create variation. So the smoothest map is going to determine smoothness or roughness. It's going to determine if something's shining or not, that kind of have that wet look or not. But try to paint some detail in there, because if you're not going to paint detail, you might as well just not use a smoothest map and just allocate a grayscale or a level of grey in Unity as the smoothness, and that can dictate if it's shiny or not. You don't even need a map. So if you're going to use a map, put some detail in there. Paint some fur on if it's a horse's body. Try to suggest some fur, have some variation. The light's going to pick up on that. Animations, ensure your rig hierarchy matches the model. That happens a lot. We'll give something to an animator, comes back and the rig's naming's changed. It won't work. We'll load the asset into Unity, we'll load the animations, and it doesn't animate because somebody messed with the naming or the structure's not the same. Don't embed your model into your animation. I think it's probably the other way around. Don't embed if you don't need it. Sometimes we have an animation in the asset, and only one of your animations needs to have that asset, because say the other animations share the same, the other assets share the same animation. They don't all have to have that animation in the model, because it bloats your file as well. Animations bloat a FBX tremendously. So if they're all sharing the same animation, either have the animation in a separate file or embed it in one and remove it from the rest. You can bring down your project file the size drastically. That's huge. Yeah, ensure Z's forward and check for clipping. Bad, good. This happens a lot. So we'll have something skinned, and freelancer gives it back to me saying, I'm done, can I get paid? And let's go, next one. And I'll open up and I get that. That happens not on the first frame, not on the fifth frame, maybe on the 500th frame. I'll see that happen. And it's literally just taking the time, scroll through the animation, see that it all looks good, not just the first 10 frames. I'm good, I'm golden, and off we go. Scroll through all the animations, see that anything's clipping, and then just adjust the paint weight, the skin weights. Cool. That's some basics. Art fuel, you are what you eat. So if you watch a lot of art inspired stuff, you're going to want to do art. If you don't watch art inspired stuff, you're probably not going to want to do art. So just consume a lot of art. Find your voice, so know who your art parents are. Basically, that's artists that inspire you. Look at their stuff, do master studies from their work. That's how people find their style. Oh, what's my style? That used to be more of a thing with illustration. You don't hear that nowadays so much. Maybe concept artists are looking for their style. But that comes from you borrowing certain techniques from different artists. Like, oh, I like the way this guy's, I like his hatching, I like his line work, I like how loose his drawings are. And then all of a sudden, I'm an amalgamation of these guys, and I found my style. But literally, I'm just using their techniques to accomplish the task, and that's how you find your style. Limitation breeds design. Yeah, that's basically something I mentioned last time as well, is that there's so many distractions nowadays. It's especially for artists. It's a lifelong journey. Don't think you're going to study to be like an accountant. If you're done, go get your job, you just work. It's a lifelong journey. You have to keep working at your craft. The competition is real. There's really good artists out there. So how you can trick your brain into doing that is tell yourself you're just going to do 10 minutes. I'll play Zelda later. It's going to be 10 minutes, and then I'll play Zelda. It's 11 o'clock. Oh, I've run out of time to play Zelda. I'll do it tomorrow. Do it again. I'm going to just throw 10 minutes at it, and then I'll play Zelda. And then if you end up doing 3-4 hours, you do it again. Just keep tricking your brain, because if you don't do that, you probably won't get good. Yeah, game design is something that gets overlooked a lot of days nowadays. Games are being made easier and easier and easier. They've dumbed games down quite a bit. So don't forget to add consequences in your game. Basically, imagine playing Pac-Man without the ghosts. It's not a game. So try to have consequences in your game that feel meaningful. So it's not really punishing your player, because if the consequences are there when they're winning, it feels meaningful. If the consequences aren't real, it doesn't feel like a real win. Borderlands, for example, when you die, they take some credits from your account. The amount they take versus how much you earn, you don't even feel it. It's a joke. They might as well not have taken off any credits from my account. And I think the boss is still at half life, so he's still injured from our last fight. And I go take him down, and it's basically fading forward. It doesn't feel meaningful. So just keep that in mind. Consequences in your game design is super important. Game design, I would say the premises of game design is that it's optional participation. It's pretty much why you can do a job in a game and it feels fun versus doing a job in real life, and sometimes it's not fun. You put someone in a restaurant, you have to make burgers. Like, oh, I hate my life. Come home, give them the game, they're making burgers. I love this, take my money. Optional participation. There's also a lot of things like visual feedback, which is the bar above the person's head. So basically, you're having your own cheerleaders encouraging you to do life. It's like this bar saying, you're so close, you're so close. And it's all these things that will add up that will make your game fun. So read the book, Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal. She breaks down what makes a game. And once you understand that, you can make a good game. Innovative pioneer. So don't do what the film industry is doing. Don't just regurgitate, try to make something different, make something new. Something that the industry is struggling with at the moment. If you're doing story, just understand, like, story is something that's quite important. Can be overlooked, can always be pushed to the back end, same thing with sound design. But take the time to understand what makes a good story. There's actually a course, Pixar released a free course. I forget what the website's called, but if you literally just Google Pixar free story course, you can actually, it'll probably take you 2 hours to do, and they'll teach you the fundamentals of what makes a story, the different acts, what needs to happen in different acts. Just take 2 hours out of your life. Teach yourself how to make a good story, and you'll carry that with you for the rest of your life. Do life studies. If you're an artist, sit and draw. Challenge yourself to draw from memory. How you do that is studying something. So if you're trying to draw something from memory, you realize I don't know how to draw this thing. Go and study it. Try to do rotations of it. So draw a motorbike from the front. But this is how you got a photo of a motorbike from the side. Try to draw it from the front. Try to draw it 3/4, but keep using the same reference image. That'll help your brain build a 3D map of that thing. But at the same time, life studies is where you're just drawing something that's in front of you, and sometimes you need that because it helps you unwind. Your brain's not working so much to do both. So don't be so attached to your work. And Yeah, the last was
I like that exercise. Take it and turn it in your mouth.
Yeah. All right, this is something that's real. I'm going to rely on you guys to fix it. So automation. All right, hold your breath. Is AI art the camera of our next generation? So basically, when the first camera was released, it made a lot of artists unemployed. Fact. And it's so funny because we've learned how to live with both because the camera can't create stylistic things until we started doing it in Photoshop. But we managed to still show different styles because the camera would capture obviously real life. And I had a lecturer that told me, why do you ever draw something that looks real or 3D render something that looks real? Just take a photo. And I carried that with me all up to this year, and I realized it's a lie. I used to hate, and I wouldn't call myself at all. My style isn't photorealistic, but I've grown to appreciate it because before cameras, that dictated a really good artist. But the moment cameras came around, I didn't value that anymore because I could achieve that with a button. Don't let us do the same thing with our art with AI. Basically, a lot of industries have become automated. So factories, we've just taken it for granted. We've kind of been born into that generation where factories are automated. I believe Lego's like 100%, 90% fully automated. Fast foods, you go to them, you go to Hungry Jack's, there's a little thing you touch, place your order, you made that person staring you behind the counter that's overworked, that doesn't want your business. You made them redundant to a certain degree. Self-serve checkouts in the grocery store, like if you go to a Big W, Kmart. Car washes, Amazon drone deliveries, cars themselves are becoming automated. There's a robotic waiter in Adelaide in one of the restaurants, a little cat that comes and brings you food. It's all precursors, and it shouldn't be called automation, it should be called unemployment. So basically, to give you an analogy, there's a US car manufacturing company that made this, well, US is basically saying they're going to reclaim a lot of the car manufacturing from China, and how they're going to do that to make it affordable because China's so cheap is they're going to use automation. And people are clapping their hands saying, yes, for automation. It's going to bring money to our economy, and what that's going to mean is going to mean more jobs. It's a lie. The company is going to implement that automation. They're going to do well. They're going to offer the people that are clapping their hands, the people that are signing bills and stuff, they're not going to get the jobs. But it sounds like jobs. It sounds like economy. But look at what the results are. Is it going to provide more jobs? No. They're saying they're going to solve getting the work that's been lost to China, they're going to solve it with automation. So in other words, you're getting the work, but you're not getting the work. And something I've actually learned from Bonnie is the Luddites. So basically, these are a bunch of crazy nut jobs that used to work in the textile industry many years ago, 1811. And they brought in sort of old school, retro, 1811 automation, and they broke the stuff. Like, you're stealing our jobs, we're going to break it. So I don't encourage you to go do that. But in your mind, don't be so quick to clap hands for AI. And that's a winner of Colorado State Fair Digital Art Competition. That person came first, and it's AI automated. I don't believe other people that competed were using AI. This person did, and I would have given them first as well if I didn't know it was done by AI. So that's what you're competing against, and try not. I don't know. You're gonna have to, answer this question yourself, because there's that fear of, oh, what happens if I don't adopt it? Am I going to be left behind? Will I not work as fast? But I think we have to start thinking as a collective and not as an individual at this point. And realistic standards, if you go into ArtStation, it can break your heart. You can look at stuff and like, no ways, man, I'm going to fail. That's Sonic's original design. That's concept art for you. That's Treebeard from Lord of the Rings. That's from Weta. Great art. I'm not dissing the art. But that's functional art, concept art. That's true concept art. They've focused on what's the concept. They weren't trying to impress anybody. They just captured the idea on paper. Where today, it's capture the idea on paper and get a round of applause. And I think you just got to go easy on yourself and just go back to, if you're trying to do a concept, that's concept art. How to get hired, do a focus portfolio. have a look at what current trends are, especially with hand-painted styles and that kind of stuff. Stand out, be different. Don't always try to assimilate and try to be the same, because you're not going to stand out that way. Try to do something different. Advertise yourself or look for work on Polycount if you're looking for freelance work. It's good to do that. Just manage that with your studies. Maybe give yourself, look at what they're doing on Polycount and give yourself your own kind of project that will tick the boxes of what you need to do in your assignments as well. Become an influencer or teach. Sometimes when you teach, you learn more than you realize. I do that with board games or role-playing games. I'll read a role-playing game and I'll actually make a 2-hour tutorial on how to play the role-playing game. But in creating that 2-hour tutorial, I've just taught myself the game, and I understand it a lot more. Once you have to explain it to somebody else, you're forced to understand it. Start a passion project. Visit our website if you're looking for work. Constantly we're advertising for work. Or just camp out at Game Plus like Bonnie did. That's how she got work. And if you want me to review your portfolio, I'm not offering to mentor you, but I'm happy to give you feedback. I will touch on that, the difference between giving criticism versus best I can describe constructive feedback is when somebody isolates what's wrong with your art and then spends the time to think on how to fix it versus just standing there saying it sucks. So I like to give you constructive feedback and try to do the same for other people. Little nuggets. Party and shot, touched on this last time. People that shoot you while you're chasing them. Go look into it, there's a better explanation than that. Learn how to work with developers is an important thing, especially if you're an artist. They think differently to you, and it's very much that you can these two different camps, because you can come up with an idea or concept that can challenge them, but it's going to make their job harder. You're literally coming to them with something saying, I'm going to make your life hell. And try to compromise. So don't try to find that point where you're not just saying, you're not surrendering too much ground and you're surrendering your concept and the vision of the project artistically or gameplay-wise or whatever it is. But at the same time, try to hear what they're saying and see if there's a middle ground. So compromise is so important when you're working with other teams. And when you start doing it, they'll start mirroring it, and it's a really healthy interaction. Block out time. Works good for studies and work. Just try to choose beforehand what you want to do with your time. Okay, cool. Monday nights I want to do this. Tuesday nights this. Lunchtimes I want to do that. Instead of when your lunchtime comes around, what should I do now? You basically going to default to something that's meaningless most of the time, or you're going to spend half that time trying to figure out what you want to do. Just decide full time. And this is the art curve. This is what most of us expect. Nice straight line. Put in the effort to see the growth. This is what it really looks like. It's like building a puzzle. You're looking for those corner pieces. So understand that's how your art growth is going to look like. It's going to feel like you're failing and you shouldn't be there. You'll probably have imposter syndrome, and then you'll be doing good. And that's it. All right. Any questions for Bonnie, or you guys would like to know anything how Bonnie maybe transitioned from being on that side of the table to this side of the table?
So you're at Game Plus before you started working for Foxy, right?
Yeah, I had a desk at Game Plus, so I started just doing work for different GDML teams, sort of freelancing like that, and then just by being there and putting stuff up and having a portfolio on ArtStation, Oliver and Mark from Foxy both came up to me and just asked to have a look at my stuff, and it turned out it was what they were looking for. So
As a freelancer, how did you actually market yourself to get work?
That's something I'm definitely still figuring out myself. I think it is a matter of finding your audience and finding things that you are good at and focusing on them. Obviously, it's difficult as a generalist, but for me, I'm mostly doing work with Foxy now. So I've sort of found, the company I'm.
The work didn't find Bonnie, we found her. Like, she didn't find the work, we found her. So she placed herself in a prime position of, okay, she surrounded herself with a whole bunch of studios who are not just doing passion projects, or actually making, we can actually provide her a job, commercial studios. So she was hiring a desk at Game Plus and working on passion projects for other students. And we would walk past the screen and we'd see how good, like the great work she's doing, and she'd say, can you maybe do this for us? here's another. Why don't you come sit next to me? And off we go. No, just tell the other clients to go away. You'll be the only client. And that's purely from positioning yourself in Game Plus. So if you can be strategic that way, if you position yourself online, you position yourself maybe on YouTube videos or on forums, try to just think that way.
It's the strength of networking,
Yeah,
making yourself visible and your work constantly visible to people who might be interested in
I
employing you.
was really afraid of going to Game Plus when I was at AIE. I was very intimidated by it. I thought, oh no, there's all these big professionals, they don't want anything to do with me. And then I went in and immediately, like, it just was demystified. It was just like everyone was really nice. They wanted to talk to you, they wanted to know your work. So I think like it's a really good opportunity to try and get used to going to Game Plus, talking to people there, or even just knowing it's there.
Just because you mentioned that one of the big things is to have a focused portfolio, I am genuinely a bit puzzled as to how you do that while also being a generalist. What sort of things can you focus on?
Well, show that you're a generalist. Show that you can do, but make it very clear. Like break out the fact that you can do sculpting and show a sculpting example, but show the finished asset and show that you've done each step of the process. Probably be the way I would break down how a generalist could be focused. It's not just showing the asset and leaving up for the person that's going to hire you to guess which part did you make. Show them the breakdown, saying I did the sculpting, I did this, I did that. That way you can broadly focus on I've done all these. But
so it's more showing detail of the different things.
The process, the creation process. Break it down to show that you've done all the steps, and do it. Don't over, like literally just one post for the sculpt, one post maybe to show you did the low poly model, but the same in ArtStations. The first post would be the final piece, and all the images below would be the different steps how you got there. That's how I would think a generalist would do it. Obviously, a specialist, if they're just in sculpting, or ArtStation, I'd just be smelling for sculpting.
Thank you.
I'd just like to repeat something Zygmunt said last week about make it easy for people to figure out what you're good at. Yeah, tell a little story, use your skills, show them piece by piece. Yeah.
I always find it's good as well to utilise the text on the side to talk about what you did in the project and any challenges that you might have overcome, because just looking at the art shows what you can do but not how you think always. Do you appreciate
it might be just me, but because I was going through so many portfolios, I wouldn't read cover letters. I wouldn't read this big long essay to do it right, and I wouldn't read the text. I'm literally just scrolling through no, yes, no, yes. When I find a yes, I drop them an email, contact me on Skype, let's talk further. Because I've got other work to do. I'm just trying to get through this. I'm not going to sit down and read fluffy words, but that might just be me.
So it's kind of a show, don't tell type of situation.
Yeah.
But that's done with the individual. So what I'm saying today is my experience. You'll find somebody who'll say something different. So I personally wouldn't read the ArtStation blog section where other people swear by it.
So tell a visual story. So UVs, textures.
Yeah. Picture tells 1,000 words,
Concept
and I basically
art.
want to see the final picture.
And then final picture.
I think it's cool if something is, if you're passionate about it, maybe it's also cool for you to explain why you did what you did. But yeah, it's not actually, maybe when you're working in a studio to inspire the rest of the team members, you'll explain, I put the horn on the saddle because that's paying tribute back to that culture or whatever the case may be. And that helped out the rest of the studio, the team in the studio, to be inspired and to attach meaning to things. There, maybe it's good to explain your work, but do it on station. It's not going to cost you too much time, and it will flesh out your work and show passion. But I'm probably not going to read it.
When you're looking for freelancers, do you prefer going through looking through maybe a list you've created of people you've worked with before, or do you prefer putting up advertisements and then getting people to come to you?
I always work with people I work with. But sometimes those people, if it was freelancers, they're working part-time, they maybe got full-time work. And at that stage, we were offering them full-time work, so we were hoping to get freelancers. So I'll maybe lose some freelancers now to put out an advert to get some new ones, and I'll come across your work. That's generally when I bump into new artists. Or I'll work with an artist, and I'll work with some other artists, and I realize these are easier to work with, they work fast, their quality is better, I won't use that one as much. But it's generally, good work ethic and good quality, and that'll keep you in that cycle. It's not as if we use you once and they'll use you again, because that happens in the film industry. Somebody get used and then forgotten about. Not always, but we get those stories where, in our case, if you do good work, you're going to hear from me. Got a lot of work to do.
I've been looking at some jobs, and some of them advertise technical artists as like pipeline tools and project management tools and systems like that. Why is that like considered art instead of like say an engineer or fixed a program software design?
I wouldn't consider myself a technical artist, so you probably want to pick somebody's brain who is, but I'm forced to understand the technical side of things. It's just part of it, but I wouldn't advertise myself as a technical artist. It's probably when people post an advert, sometimes they're just grabbing onto buzzwords to think that they're going to get an artist. They've been advised, you better get a technical artist, you better get a concept artist, so they'll just drop in those buzzwords. And sometimes there's more to it. So, yeah. But a technical artist, if they are looking for somebody who's a technical artist, you're probably going to be dealing with a lot of kind of, it's pretty apparent, dealing with a lot of stuff like shaders and that kind of pipeline versus sitting in ZBrush and just, slapping some cool stuff around, or into Substance Beta or Maya. Technical artist side, this sounds like you're going to be working closely with the programmers. So if you do see that title, that's what I would get from it. Like, okay, there's going to be a lot of...
can be a lot of writing, say, in Python, just scripts to run stuff, to do auto-rigging for the particular, not auto-rigging, but like rigging in the style that studio needs. So they'll write a tool to automate that, or some other function in Maya. And they do a lot of rigging, sometimes they do modeling.
Coming soon, Phoebe Shaw from Mighty Kingdom can explain all this to you in a few weeks' time. She's a technical artist extraordinaire.
Okay, yeah, so I've got a question. For, I guess, the management style, like when you have these people that you have to schedule for and stuff like that, if people get behind and stuff like that, how do you, I guess...
How do I deal with artists that fall behind?
Yeah.
I give them less important work. But you get different, work with different art directors. Some that just don't have the time for artists that are not, pulling their weight. I like to give people opportunities. So if they are struggling a bit, give them time, because when they figure it out, they might actually be a powerhouse. So give them space to breathe. I'm not so rigid, but I give them something that's less important. But once I see that they're wasting my time, then I'll just say sorry. But there's room, there's a buffer for making room for artists that are still finding their feet. How I do that, I'm pretty direct. I'm pretty direct with somebody saying, it's always good to give a person a deadline up front, because that is pretty upfront and everyone can see what it is. So it's a benchmark, and if they're falling behind that, there's no sort of making excuses around that. They're going to, obviously, if you're dealing with somebody that's falling behind, they might be giving excuses. But it's a hard fact to go back to saying, this is what we agreed on, you missed it. Cool, I'll give you 2 more weeks, give you 1 more month. They still missed it, saying, okay, then you don't feel so bad to let them go, because you know you've given them 2 more weeks from their agreed date. And that's generally how I do it.
Any other questions from the artists in the room?
I will touch on one thing. Ask yourself, why do you make art? So basically, if your art doesn't get recognized, you don't get the recognition, you still make it. If your art actually serves a higher purpose, if you're actually saying something with your art, then getting that recognition is not that important. So try to consider, are you saying something with your art? And for me, if I work on things, a lot of designs make me reflect on, we will look at anatomy and nature. I love looking at insects and stuff. And you look at those designs, and hopefully it'll make you question the sort of that deliberate design that we see in nature, and follow that trail, because there's a higher question there. So I always like to end on that. Cool.
Thank you very much,
Awesome.
Oliver,
Yep.
and Bonnie and Steve for coming in.